Okay, time once again for our matinee show. And look, baby Cookie just walked into the office because she's like, "Oh, I heard you guys talking, so I have to come in too."
Yeah, she wanted to go out, and I told her no.
She wants to be the star of the show. I think.
She's mad. She's mad at me.
She's mad at Daddy.
Okay.
Yeah. She's like, "I'm just gonna go over my thing and blah blah blah."
Yeah.
All right, so this is matinee episode number 60. We actually had a lot of other shit going on, so we didn't have time to go to the theater this week, and there wasn't anything we super really wanted to see. So we actually did, I think we did 1 on Shudder and 2 on Netflix this week. But they are like movies that came out this year, like pretty recently.
One's a series.
Yeah, and one's actually kind of a true crime sort of series. And we'll get to that in a moment. But the first one I want to talk about is called Nightmare Cinema. Now, technically, this movie premiered at the Fantasia Film Festival in 2018. However, it did not get like a wider release until summer of this year, 2019. It didn't play here. It was just limited. But it eventually did come to Shudder, and that is where I watched it. Now, I've been wanting to see this one for a really long time just because, 1, it's a horror anthology, and I love anthologies. 2, it had like some big names behind it. Like Mick Garris was the guy, you know, he's the one that did Masters of Horror. He's done like a bunch of Stephen King adaptations. And he's kind of the one behind this, the guy that put it together. And it also had like one of the segments was directed by Joe Dante. There was one directed by David Slade. There's like all these like really big directors attached to this project. And they did like, they each did a story. There were 5 of the stories with a kind of sort of half-assed wraparound. I will say that the first time I watched this movie, I was kind of like meh about it. I was like, it wasn't as good as I was expecting it to be. But I watched it again because I watched it a couple weeks ago, and because I thought we were going to review it a couple weeks ago, and then we didn't get around to it. So I watched it again, like right before we recorded this, and I liked it much better the second time. I don't know why. Like maybe I was just paying more attention to it or something like that. But yeah, so this is basically the wraparound story, which stars Mickey Rourke, of all people. It's basically kind of a thing where there's this creepy-looking movie theater, and people are just, like, walking past the movie theater, and then they see their name and, like, the title of their segment, like their character's name, obviously, not their real name, and the title of their segment, like, on the marquee. So then they go in, and they sit in this empty theater, and then a movie plays that is presumably supposed to be like what their greatest fear is or what their nightmare is or something like that. And then I guess they kind of end up dying. That's not super clear. But Mickey Rourke plays the projectionist. He's not like a real fleshed out character. You really don't even see him, and he doesn't like talk until like the end of the second segment. So that's kind of one thing that I wish they would have done better was I wish they would have like beefed up the wraparound segment, which was also directed by Mick Garris. But, you know, because you're not really sure, like, what, is he deaf? Is he, like, what is his deal? Is he, like, a nightmare master type of person? Like, you know what I mean? They don't really, there's not a lot of clarity there. But it's just the wraparound, so it doesn't really matter. Now, the first story is called The Thing in the Woods. And it was directed by Alejandro Brugues. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. You know, he did Juan of the Dead, which a lot of people really liked. He did, like, one of the Dusk Till Dawn sequels, and I think he did a segment in ABCs of Death, too. This one is kind of like a send-up of slasher movies. Like, you kind of have, like, the final girl. It's almost like you're coming in at the end, like, the last 15 minutes of a teen slasher movie. And it's, like, really... the tone of it is really weird, because it's almost like a comedy or like a parody of a slasher movie. And I'm not going to like spoil it because there's kind of a twist, but it's, you know, it's a fun episode. It's like dumb, but it's supposed to be dumb. Like it knows what it's doing. And it's like super gory. Like a lot of the segments in this are super gory, which I appreciated. But I liked this better the second time, but this was like not my favorite. But it was like a good way to start out because it was very much like an old school slasher, like with a twist and like with a kind of, you know, like a parody type of thing going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, and like I said, I'm not going to spoil what the twist is because you probably won't guess. The second one was called Mirari, and I looked that up, and that's actually a Latin word meaning marvel. This one was directed by Joe Dante, and it's about this woman who, she's really pretty, but she has like a scar on her face, like a big scar that I guess she got when she was a kid and she was in a car accident. and she's about to get married to her, like, super good-looking boyfriend, and she's, like, really, really insecure about it. So he kind of, like, makes the recommendation. It's like, oh, well, why don't you look into getting plastic surgery? You know, my mom got all this plastic surgery, and she looks fantastic, and all you'd have to do is, like, fix that little thing, and they can fix it, and then you'll be perfect, and all this other stuff. So she finally agrees because they're going to get married, and she doesn't want to look bad, and she's, like, really self-conscious about it. So she goes to this clinic, and Richard Chamberlain is actually the surgeon, which I didn't realize the first time I watched it. I'm like, ah, God, he's so familiar. But then the second time, it kind of registered who it was. And at first, it seems kind of legit. Like, it's this clinic, and they're all like, yeah, we're going to fix this. But then he starts, like, making these other recommendations. It's like, oh, while you're under there, why don't we narrow your nose and make your tits bigger and do all this other stuff? And she's like, I guess, you know what I mean? Because she, like, wants to make her boyfriend happy. So all this other shit. And as it goes on, it kind of just gets sketchier and sketchier. And, like, you're not really sure because she wakes up and her face is all bandaged. So you don't really know what they did to her face or her boobs or anything. But she starts thinking there's something weird going on. So she starts, like, kind of creeping around the clinic and shit like that. This is probably my second favorite. I've been watching some other reviews of this one, and it's funny how different reviewers were, like, picked their favorite ones and, like, ranked them and stuff. This one didn't come up on a lot of people's, like, this was my favorite one, but this is probably my second favorite. There's just something about it I really liked. Baby Cookie, she's tearing up the cat tree back there. Yeah. But I will say that it seemed very much like a gory Twilight Zone episode. Specifically the Eye of the Beholder, if you've seen that episode. Then this might not come as a shock to you. Although, like I said, it's weird because they don't really explain what the deal is. You know what I mean? It just kind of, like, happens at the end, and then you're just like, okay. But in a way, that's kind of good that they didn't explain it. Because, like I said, the whole premise of the movie is that these people are wandering off the street, and they're seeing, like, their future, they're seeing their nightmare or something like that. So it doesn't have to be totally realistic. So then the third one is called Mashit. And that was directed by, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but Ryuhei Kitamura. Now, this guy actually directed Midnight Meat Train, the Clive Barker adaptation. He also did the movie Downrange, which is on Shudder at the moment. And that's the one with, like, the people and the sniper, like, on that.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It's like, I think I recommended that on our Halloween show.
Real simple storytelling, but worked. It was like something kind of like out of, I don't know, Duel.
Yeah.
Real simple and direct, just survival. Yeah. Yeah, I like those.
So that was the same director as this one. Unfortunately, I think this was my second least favorite. It was kind of this one was called Mashit, and it was set in a Catholic school, and it was basically just a straight up, like, demon possession thing. There was, like, a demon named Mashit that was, like, running around this Catholic school, and he was, like, making kids kill themselves and, you know, all this other kind of stuff. And something that, like, I know what he was trying to do with it. He was trying to make it like one of those, like, 70s and 80s Italian movies. Not a giallo necessarily, but I saw another reviewer compare this to the 1989 movie The Church, which was directed by Michele Soavi and produced by Dario Argento. And as soon as he said that, I was like, exactly, that's exactly what he was trying to do. It had, like, the Goblin-esque score. It had, like, a lot of the kind of Dario Argento-esque lighting. And it was kind of sort of over the top, and it was, like, super, super gory. Like, there's this one, like, thing at the end where, like, you know, it's like little, if you don't mind seeing little kids getting, like, getting, like, their arms and heads chopped off and shit like that by a priest with a sword, then you will totally be into this. Like, I liked this better the second time I saw it.
It's like an Italian movie. They'll break that taboo.
They will. They do animals. Not give a single shit.
They'll kill the dog. They'll do anything in Italian.
They do not give a single shit.
Don't kill the cat. They kill the cat.
They do. It's like, well, that reminds me that just last night we were watching, I finally got around to seeing that Eli Roth movie, The Green Inferno, which was, like, his homage to Italian cannibal movies of the 70s and 80s.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty entertaining. It wasn't as disgusting as I was expecting.
Like, it was about like Bone Tomahawk.
It was pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
You know, and there was some stuff that I was just like, nice one, and stuff like that. But I still think that Cannibal Holocaust was way worse.
In the 70s, they didn't give a shit.
They really didn't. And it's like, Cannibal Holocaust in particular because they really killed animals in that shit. But yeah, so this one, like I said, it was good, but there was just something about it that, I don't know, that just didn't resonate as much as some of the other ones. I don't know. Maybe just because it was like a straight up like Catholic demon type of story and it's like wasn't terribly original. Maybe that's why. I don't know what it was. So the fourth one is actually, this was my favorite because it was the weirdest. This one was called This Way to Egress. And this was the one that was directed by David Slade, who most famously probably did 30 Days of Night. He also directed Hard Candy, which if you haven't seen that, you need to see that shit. It's really, really good. He also did a couple of Black Mirror episodes. Metalhead, which was the one about that dog thing, right? With like the metal dog or whatever. And he also did the Choose Your Own Adventure one, Bandersnatch. So that's the same director as this one. Now this has Elizabeth Reeser in it. She's, very recently was in The Haunting of Hill House. And this one is really cool. It's like, it's in black and white. And it basically has to do this woman, and she's just in this, what you presume is a psychiatrist's office, except it's really weird. She's there with her 2 kids, and she's been waiting a long time, and it seems like every time she goes back to the front desk to, like, ask what the hell is taking so long, the woman behind the desk is, like, super surly to her and everything, but she looks different, like, every time. Like, first she looks kind of normal, then she's, like, all dirty, and then, like, her eyes are all fucked up, like she's turning into an alien or something. And then when this woman finally gets into the doctor's office, and she says something about her husband leaving 2 days ago, and it's like everything's going weird, and he's like, oh, is everyone getting deformed around you and stuff? And she's like, yeah, exactly, except for him and the kids. She sees these people as like deforming and all this other kind of shit. So this one was like really surreal, and it had like some David Lynch kind of shit, had some David Cronenberg kind of shit, especially like with this weapon that she has and stuff. Again, this is one they don't really explain like what the hell is going on. I guess it's like a different reality or different dimension or something like that. But it's not really all that important because like the cinematography is super cool, and it's just like such a weird, creepy story that they don't really have to explain it because it just like freaked me out really bad. But this is definitely my favorite out of all of them. And then the last one was called Dead, and it was directed by Mick Garris. And it's just about this kid. He's like a piano prodigy or whatever. And he is leaving a performance one night with his parents, and they get set upon by presumably a carjacker or a serial killer. I don't know what the fuck he is, but he ends up like killing the parents and almost killing the kid, but the kid comes back to life, and then he can see dead people. So he's just in the hospital, and there's like all this kind of like the killer's coming back to get him. He sees his mom, but it's like, is it really his mom? And he sees other dead people walking around and shit like that. This one was pretty good too. I feel like Mick Garris, I love that he like puts together these types of anthology movies because, like I said, he was the one behind the Masters of Horror series. But I always found that like when he directs, I never like him all that much. He was the one that directed the Shining miniseries. He did that one.
I liked that miniseries. Like, I didn't like it.
Yeah, he also did a couple other Stephen King ones. He did Riding the Bullet, which is pretty good. He did Sleepwalkers, which I didn't really like. You know what I mean? And I think the two segments of Masters of Horror he did were not my favorites. This one is actually decent. I liked it better than... I probably liked this one maybe third. I don't know. It's hard for me to rank them. But, all in all, this is pretty much... if you liked Creepshow, like the series, most of the segments in this, I think, were better than some of the segments on there. But kind of like a similar vibe. It's pretty gory, and there's like a lot of, just like in the Creepshow series, there's like a lot of different types of horror going on. You got slasher horror, you got surrealist horror, you got kind of old school possession horror. You got all different kind of stuff. Gore was pretty good. Some of the CGI is a little, but it's low budget, and they did really good for what they had. Like I said, I would have liked them to expand on the wraparound story a little bit more. Like, what is Mickey Rourke's character? Like, what is his end game exactly? Like, what is he doing? Like, showing all these people these movies, and then like he's storing them and stuff. Because he only has like maybe 2 or 3 minutes of screen time total, like over the whole thing, so they don't really go into that. Yeah. But, you know, it's the wraparound story, so it's really not that big a deal. But like I said, if you have Shudder, it's definitely worth checking out if you like anthologies. It's one of the better anthologies that I've seen recently. Yeah. So, you know. Actually,
recently, like you said, you know, if you have Shudder, you can see this, but recently in horror, Dr. Sleep really has been the best thing going recently, when you say. In the theater right now?
In the theaters, yeah.
Yeah, in the theaters. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some, and, you know, I really liked The Lighthouse, but, you know, we've already talked about that.
But I guess that's kind of horror. Yeah,
it was kind of horror,
horror. But after watching Shining again on the big screen, and then they came out with that Dr. Sleep recently, that's really where it's at, I would think, right now. Just have to give out that recommendation, too. Just get people to go out and see Dr. Sleep while it's still in the theater.
I mean, hopefully, is it still doing well? I haven't checked on it.
I think it might be. You have to check. I don't know.
I mean, I've heard a lot of people are talking about it, so I
enjoyed it.
I did too. It's
if you like The Shining, that's the one you need to see.
I actually wouldn't mind seeing it again because, you know, I like to see things a second time just because I pick up on a lot more stuff.
You want to see it before it leaves the theaters. It was a good theater experience.
Oh, yeah.
It was an IMAX. We saw it, I think.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
But yeah, that's the same thing. And it was the same thing with Nightmare Cinema. It's like, you know, the first time I watched it, I was like, a little underwhelmed, but when I watched it again, I was like, oh, that was like much better than I remembered. So sometimes I like things better if I see them a second time. And so this one was definitely one. And like I said, I recommend it if you like anthologies. It's, you know, one of the better anthologies I've seen lately. And it is like there's a lot of like really good directors involved. So, you know, check it out. All right, so the second movie we watched this week was actually a new one that just came out on Netflix a week or two ago, and this is called A.M.I, or A.M.I, which stands for Artificial Machine Intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, I had been seeing this trailer for, you know, a week or two since it had come out, and I guess I was thinking it was going to be a particular type of movie. And it's kind of not that kind of movie. No. It's kind of like, it has sci-fi elements. It has like a Black Mirror type of thing. But really, it's more like a slasher.
Yeah. It's not bad, though.
Which I was pleasantly surprised.
It's not a bad movie. It was pretty cool.
It was actually pretty entertaining. And it's like, it's funny because
remember that movie, Upgrade?
Yeah, and you're not the only person that has compared it to that.
It reminded me of Upgrade, but not quite as cool.
Yeah.
I think Upgrade was cooler.
Upgrade was an awesome movie.
Imagine if Upgrade didn't quite have the special effects, what do you call it? Special effects budget.
Yeah.
And instead it was more like a slasher.
And more focused on like teens or like college age.
And more focused on like, you know, deception and mindfuck type deals. You just have to see it. I mean, an AI version of the chick's dead mother is talking to her over the damn phone, getting her to fucking kill people, basically. That's what it's about.
Yeah, so it's almost kind of like you said, it's like Upgrade. I've seen it. Yeah. It had a little bit of, remember that sci-fi movie that we reviewed, I Am Mother?
Yeah.
It had a little bit of that.
And it is like a Black Mirror episode.
It is like kind of like a gory Black Mirror episode.
Imagine like a slasher Black Mirror episode. But it's a full length movie. It's not bad. It's a good movie, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like I guess. Like I said, I don't like to read reviews and stuff beforehand, but I had just heard kind of through the grapevine that this was getting kind of meh reviews, like kind of just so-so. I think it's just like 40-50% or whatever it was.
Oh, man, I don't know, man.
And I can see how maybe some people might not like it, but I actually ended up really having a good time with it. It's a pretty fun movie, I thought.
You got to compare it to what else is out there right now. Compared to the average thing that's out there right now, this is above the rest. I'd probably put it at about a 75, 70, high 70s.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's like, it kept my interest the whole time. Yeah. It's like, you know what I mean? And especially once it went off in like a slasher direction, it was like really fascinating. But basically, it's just like, there's this girl, she's lost her mother, presumably in a car accident, which either she was driving or she feels like she caused it somehow. They don't really go into that. But so her dad is kind of like turning into this drunk party guy, like I guess to get over it or whatever. And he's kind of like flirting with all the daughter's friends and he's being kind of creepy and everything. So she's not having an easy time.
He's not hot. That's the funny thing about it.
He just looks
he's like Mr. Snuffleupagus, but he's running.
He's running after
I can understand
19-year-old.
I can understand if you're 50 and you're fucking bringing it, but you know, come on, man. you know.
Well, I guess that's like his fucked up way of dealing with the grief. You know what I mean? That's kind of what they were getting.
Well, what was funny, what I thought was kind of unrealistic, is some of the girls were into him. Or at least one of them seemed like she was
but she had ulterior motives.
Yeah, I guess so.
She had ulterior motives. She was just doing that just to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Because she hated that girl, yeah.
That's true.
So basically, the lead girl, I think the actress's name is Debs Howard. She is a spitting image of 80s Debbie Gibson. And like the whole fucking movie, I was like looking at her going, holy crap, she looks just like Debbie Gibson in the 80s.
If she had that reddish strawberry blonde hair,
I'm like, is that her daughter?
Look just like her.
I guess not, but it's like oh my God, she looks just like her. And like, so the whole thing, I was through the whole movie, I was like singing Debbie Gibson song. Well, the one Debbie Gibson song that I
liked the movie because it did kind of have a retro flavor to it, even though it was fully modern.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dealing with AI and telephones and stuff, but it was kind of like the movie they would have made back in the 80s and the 90s when we were coming up, had they had cell phones.
Just, with the different technology.
Yeah, and of course it's shot a lot better.
Yeah. Because, I mean, basically what ends up happening is this girl who has just lost her mom, and she's going through a lot of, trauma. She's on, like, medication, like antidepressants and stuff. And she finds an abandoned cell phone that has an app on it that's kind of like Siri. And you can apparently personalize it. And so this one is, she kind of personalizes it, but then it kind of personalizes itself. Okay. So it kind of like sounds like her dead mom. And there comes a point where I think she thinks it is her dead mom. Like talking to it. Like she talks to it like her mom, and it knows things that her mom would know.
Yeah. And if you guys have ever seen Upgrade, that when that guy put that chip in his head, the AI program took over his body and make it even fight, but he fought like a robot. It was pretty cool, I like that movie.
Yeah, we did a review.
I gotta get that on fucking Blu-ray.
I thought we have it on DVD, right? Because didn't Sophie send us that?
Yeah, that's right. Somebody sent it.
Because we reviewed it.
So we didn't rent that. We actually have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I got to see that one again. In the case of this movie, the AI on the phone just tells her what to do in when situations arise, and it gives her bad fucking advice. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and she's totally like, and in a way you can understand how it can happen because one, she's really traumatized by her mom dying. It's like, I guess it wasn't that long ago. So she's having like a lot of mental problems. Her dad's like just kind of checked out and doing his other thing and like banging the friends. All her boyfriend sucks. All her friends suck. Objectively, they all suck, I guess, unless we're just seeing everything from her fucked up point of view. But so, in a way, you can understand, like, why she kind of just goes off the deep end and starts doing every horrible thing that the phone tells her to do. And I'm wondering, too, I wondered in one scene, the phone says to her, like, do it. And I thought, is that a Session 9 reference? Because it sounded almost exactly like, even though it was a woman's voice, it sounded almost exactly like Session 9 when he's like, do it, Gordon. It sounded almost like that, so I wondered if it was an homage to that. Because this did have a couple of subtle homages. There was a very subtle homage to The Shining in there. Well, not that subtle, but... Yeah. You know what I mean? There was like...
Cutting through the door.
Little callbacks to like other horror movies.
That's played out. Everybody does that.
I know, but
whenever they cut through a door, they gotta do an homage.
Well, I'm glad that they didn't do... Because I was expecting it. I was expecting her to stick her face in there, but she didn't. Yeah. She didn't. But I feel like the filmmakers knew that you were expecting it. They're like, haha, we're not going to do it. But yeah, so I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie. You know what I mean?
It wasn't bad.
It was pretty damn good, and especially like I said, because I think I was expecting it to go in a more sci-fi direction, but it went in a more slasher direction. Yeah. And it's fairly gory, and so I was kind of into it. I was like, all right, I see what you're doing. I'd have
to say it's above average when you compare it to its competition. I mean, it had some imaginative ideas.
Yeah,
the acting was decent. The casting was good.
And it kind of went into like a lot of deeper stuff, like how are we starting to connect too much to our devices because we're kind of distant from each other. It also reminded me
all the time you're facing the device.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of that movie that had Scarlett Johansson in it. What was it called? Her, with Joaquin Phoenix, about the guy that fell in love with the app on the phone.
Yeah, okay.
So it was kind of like that, but a much, much darker version. Yeah. So I feel like it had some shit to say about, how people deal with grief and, how people like can't connect with one another. So they end up connecting with this essentially fake person like inside of technology, which, in a way that's a very Black Mirror type of.
Now the more I think about it, I mean, within the confines of its limited budget, this movie is pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, they weren't working with much in terms of money and everything. And with what little they had, they did put on a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I totally was not expecting it to be. I just thought it was going to be like some sucky but
I'd probably give it an 80.
Yeah. I just sat there and watched the whole thing, and it was entertaining as hell, I thought. But yeah, so it's on Netflix at the moment. It's only been up there a couple of weeks. So if you like kind of Black Mirror-y, slasher-y type of stuff all mashed together, go check it out. Like I said, it's getting mixed reviews, but I thought it was really, really cool. And
they're going to mix review everything.
Fuck their mixed reviews.
Well, something doesn't explode or something, you know what I mean? It doesn't have enough special effects. They don't take into account the budget.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This isn't a Marvel feature.
That's true.
You know what I mean? People aren't going to be flying and shit. Why didn't she fly? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just not that kind
That would be so funny if you just made like a totally realistic movie and just all of a sudden somebody flew in the middle of it and no one said anything.
Aren't they flying? She had no superpowers.
But yeah. All right, seriously. It's on Netflix, so go check it out. All right. Now, the third thing that we watched this week, I think it only just came on Netflix November 10th, and I was super excited to see this. This is actually one of the like a true crime miniseries, just like they did with the Madeleine McCann one. They did one about the Alcázar murders. They did one about the Keepers. They did that one. This one is actually fascinating because this is a case from France from 1984 that I wrote about in my book Faceless Villain 3. And I didn't know that a lot of Americans knew a lot about it, so I thought it was really cool that they made a miniseries about it. It's called Who Killed Little Gregory?
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. It's a well put together documentary, the way and the way they tell the stories, and it's all subtitled. But if you're into true crime, that's just actually going to kind of add to it that it's subtitled. You definitely wouldn't want to watch this shit dubbed. But it was just a great example of basically fake news, how fake news can fuck people up, and just sensational, the sensationalism around cases and how it can drive the people involved with these cases into fucking actually commit murder and stuff. It's a good show.
Yeah, show. I mean, if
makes you question a lot of shit after you see this. Well, how many times did this happen in other cases where the media made a media circus? I can think of the the John Benet Ramsey case. Other cases. Remember the one with the little girl that fucking disappeared? They think she was taken out of the damn window.
Yeah, Madeleine McCann. Yeah,
Madeleine McCann. It's a lot of bad stuff around those cases, and it's media.
Well, and it seems too. This actually, like I said, if you've read my book, I wrote about this. I wrote kind of a summary of this case in my book. This happened in like a little village in France called La Pange in 1984, and there's this little boy named Gregory Villemin. And he was 4 years old. He was like playing in his front yard, apparently, and his mom was ironing in the house. And he was abducted and murdered. Now, the weird thing about this is that for several years before the kid was taken, the family had been being harassed by, they think it was someone in the family or someone that knew them because they knew like a lot of shit about them. And they knew like all of the family drama that was going on and everything. Because, this was a pretty extended family that lived in this village. And a lot of it seemed to stem from jealousy, like from the kid's dad, Jean-Michel, who he had just been made like a foreman at the factory that was in town, like where everybody in the town worked. And so a lot of people were jealous that he had more money than them. He had like a really beautiful wife, and he had like a really cute son, and all this other kind of stuff. So there was like, there was all this weird shit going on. They would get like all these weird phone calls and like letters and stuff. And they started calling the person the Raven, I guess because of, there was a French movie called Le Corbeau, which was kind of about that type of thing. Like somebody that was, like an informant, or they were sending like anonymous letters and shit, and they were called that. So they started calling the person that was harassing the family the Raven. And presumably this is the person that killed the kid, because after the kid was kidnapped, but before his body was found, the family got a phone call and it wasn't even the parents. It was like their uncle or brother or something like that. Somebody got a phone call that was like, said where the kid's body was, like in the Valone, the river that was right there by the thing. So the thing about it, it's like, this is a 5-episode series. It's all in French. Like you said, it's all subtitled. And it goes almost as much into the murder of the kid. And then there was another murder that happened later on, which I won't spoil if you don't know anything about this case. There's a Wikipedia page about it. Like I said, I wrote about it in my book and shit like that. But it's not a real well-known case in the U.S., but in France, it is hugely well known.
It's like their version of the John Benet Ramsey.
It is. It's like, and there are so many like just intricate little, and it's almost as much about the murder and all the shit that happened in the aftermath, but it's also about how the media portrayed all of the people that were accused at one time or another, and how they were almost kind of like, and this was back in the 80s, you know what I mean? And how they were almost kind of like indicting people like in the newspapers.
Yeah.
And just like swaying public opinion one way or the other.
Yeah, and one of the main guys who was involved in it was a reporter who's coming out of retirement. He's in his 80s in this show. He doesn't look like he's in his 80s, I'll tell you what, but he was 50 back then when he did this. But when he was involved in the case, took a bunch of photos. He was kind of an investigative reporter. And he
got friends with the parents with everybody as well.
Else. And he just tells the truth. He's like, yeah, we were just, saying, let's make it look like she did it. The story would be so much better.
Yeah.
That's the way they were.
It's like they basically were like, and the weird thing about it too was that the media kind of divided into factions. Like some of the people thought this one guy, like the cousin did it, and some people thought the mom did it.
Yeah.
And then some people thought it was somebody else. And so like everybody, like all the reporters that were kind of in these different factions would like write pieces, like kind of trying to persuade the public to their point of view, I guess.
Yeah, and when he tells you what the investigative reporters and what the news media was doing, why they were doing it, to make money more than anything else, making money off of selling photos, selling stories and ideas. They're trying to write a narrative.
Yeah.
Basically they're writing a damn reality TV show happening in the media.
Yeah.
For profit. Has nothing to do
about this 4-year-old kid that got murdered.
And it has nothing to do with this family. I mean, it's total evil. And when you look at what's going on there, it makes a lot of sense what's happening today in the news media, how fake that's become, especially the online media. Each one is selling a certain narrative with sensational headlines to get clicks, to get revenue.
Well, like I said, I don't even think that's new. I mean, that's been going on since newspapers have been invented.
But the thing is, I think the general public, because of the internet, the advent of the internet, we can now see what they're doing. Everyone's eyes are now open to what journalism is. Journalism is yellow journalism. Remember yellow journalism back at the turn of the... It's that. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's been that way. Just that people didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said...
At least Americans believed. Europeans probably didn't believe because their shit evidently was always fucking wonky.
Yeah.
Their news.
Well, they had more. It seemed like they had more of a understanding of
infotainment.
And where each newspaper was coming from.
Right.
Like they definitely have. Oh, this newspaper is this point of view. This newspaper is more liberal. This one's more conservative. So they knew like what the biases were. Like,
the USA, especially the Boomer generation, they thought the news was real. It was a Walter Cronkite whatever Walter Cronkite said. That shit was. You could take that shit to the bank. He was fucking lying too.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, and it's not even so much lying. It's like sometimes the way that you report, like you can report facts,
selective reporting,
but the words you use, the way things are framed and stuff like that. So this series goes not only into the murder, and like I said, another murder that happened in the aftermath, but it also kind of goes into, and it talks to a lot of the original journalists that worked on the case, and and what they were thinking and what they were saying at the time. And it's just kind of like, and it shows like all of the, because apparently this was a huge case in France. And so they have tons and tons of footage they have footage of the kid's funeral. They have they have 50 million pictures because this was a massive case over there, and they filmed everything.
Yeah.
So even though it's from 1984, there is so much archival footage in this, just because this poor family had cameras in their faces 24/7 pretty much.
Drove them fucking crazy.
And Which is understandable. I mean, they just lost their 4-year-old, and it's like at first, the suspicion wasn't on them necessarily. I feel like this happens a lot, like you said, in the Madeleine McCann case, in the Jean case. It always seems like whenever it's a kid that's murdered, especially if it's a cute one, which this one was as well, even if the parents aren't suspected at first or aren't suspected of the murder, the parents will always get raked over the coals because there's something else you could have done. Yeah. You weren't watching him. You weren't this, that, and the other. So they will always usually the mother. They will usually demonize the mother because they think, oh, she wasn't watching him. And they did that in this case as well. It's like, oh, well, why were you in the house ironing when he was outside in the yard?
This series will make you very media savvy if you're not already media savvy. And because what really sets this one apart is that they actually have the journalists that did this shit. One of them is talking about it. And I was getting mad. I was getting mad enough where I was kind of check out, man. I didn't want to hear any more of it because how inhumane these fuckers were. And he was saying that, well, I wouldn't do that today, but the thinking of the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I was young, that was the kind of shit that we used to do.
Well, yeah, you were just trying to get
the scoop.
The story, and you were trying to get the scoop before everyone else and sell papers. And it's
so much easier just to make the scoop and to make the story. You know what I mean? And then that story will sell better than the truth. And that's what they were doing.
Essentially. And they were aware that they were doing that.
And then each newspaper started to fall into, like you said, factions. This is the newspaper that says that she's innocent. This is the newspaper that's going to take the she's guilty approach. This is the newspaper. So each newspaper could profit selling different narratives.
Yeah.
And they were filling the market.
Yeah.
Filling voids in the market. So, fake news.
Which, well, like I said, it's been going on like that. Like I said, I read a book, several books a long time ago about kind of the early days of like newspaper competition, like in the United States and stuff. And basically, I mean, they would compete to sell the most copies.
Yeah, it's not news.
So obviously, they're going to bump up details. They're going to make things more salacious, more horrific.
Yeah, it's not news. It's yellow journalism.
If they don't have any new news, they'll just make something up, or they'll interview somebody that says, oh, they're a psychic and they know this, that, and the other thing. It's like anything to get that on the front page so people will buy it.
Infotainment masking as news.
Yeah, so it's I like that this. I mean, I like that this kind of goes into that a little bit. How that can happen, because it happens, like I said, pretty much every time, and it's usually when a little child is murdered.
Yeah, makes you careful. Make you real careful. Well, I think everybody's a lot more media savvy now than they were. Internet has blown it out of the water.
Yeah, like I said, this happened back in the 80s.
I don't believe shit those people say now.
But yeah, so this is definitely worth a watch. It's about 5 hours long because it's 5 episodes and most of them are about an hour, a little bit more than an hour. I think in French it's just called Gregory, but the English title is Who Killed Little Gregory, and it's about the Gregory Villemin murder, which happened in 1984. Like I said, I also wrote about it in my book, but it's also like a breakdown of the media case and like all the crazy shit that happened in this case. But yeah, it is definitely worth a watch if you're a true crime junkie. I watched it over 2 nights and it was just like totally riveting the whole time.
Yeah.
So definitely recommended.